was adopted. I never saw my real mother, or rather, I once lived with her, but then I was too young to remember her. I loved my foster family. They were so kind to me. I lived in a warm and comfortable house and went to bed quite late. Let me tell you about my family. First, my mother, Janice. I never called her mom or anything like that. She didn't mind at all, though. I don't think she even noticed it. She was a very kind and caring woman. Sometimes I would lay my head on her lap while we were watching TV and she would stroke the back of my head with her fingers. Secondly, my father. His real name is Richard, but he never really liked me that much, so I even started calling him Dad, in a desperate attempt to win his love. It didn't work. I think no matter what I called him, it didn't matter, and he still would never love me as his own child. This is understandable, so I didn't insist. The most important distinguishing feature of my father was his unyielding severity. He wasn't afraid to spank his daughter when she was naughty. He spanked me too without hesitation. Okay, it's just his methods. Finally, my sister, little Emily, was really very small when I was adopted, and we were almost the same age. She was only a little older than me, but I still like to think of her as my little sister. We got along better with her than some siblings. We always sat until late and just talked. She loved to chat. I mostly just listened to it because I loved it. We had a great relationship. We didn't have many rooms, and I didn't want to sleep in the living room alone. She allowed me to sleep on the floor, next to her bed, and there I always fell asleep. I liked sleeping next to her. I felt protected under the care of my little sister. One terrible Wednesday evening, everything changed. I was at home dozing when little Emily opened the front door. The sound of the door opening pulled me out of the realm of dreams, and I ran down the stairs to the living room. That's when I first remembered that today was Wednesday. I've never really kept track of what day of the week it is. I just lived without thinking about what day it was. And to be honest, my sense of time is terrible. But anyway, I realized it was Wednesday because Emily came home from the children's meeting at church. She came in and hugged me, followed by Dad and Janice. "Did you sleep well?" Janice asked, stroking my hair. I just shook my head and snorted. "Don't you dare snort at your mother like that," the father said rudely. He closed the door behind him and hung up his coat. Emily went upstairs to her bedroom, and I followed her. She began to tell me about what happened to her during the day. Normal, girly, everyday life. But I listened as if I was very interested. After her story, she suggested watching TV. I agreed and jumped on the sofa when she reached for the TV remote control. The TV turned on, and we watched it until the sun set. Emily was one of those girls who preferred channels such as Discovery, Animal Planet, and Natural Geographic to cartoons and TV series. I loved them too, so I didn't mind. In fact, these were the only channels that caught my attention. It was already late, and Janice came up behind me. "Emily, it's time to go to bed. Turn off the TV and go to your room." "You too," she pointed at me. Emily turned off the TV and reluctantly stood up. She headed towards our bedroom. I followed her, but I couldn't get rid of feeling that something is wrong. We went into Emily's room and turned off the light. But just before the lights went out, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. There was something outside the window, but as soon as I looked back, whatever it was, it disappeared. But I was wary and decided to be on the alert for the sake of my sister. I lay in the dark and only a thin beam of light from a lantern on the street slightly illuminated the room. From time to time I could swear I heard a faint noise outside the window. The rustling of leaves, the crunch of a broken branch, the rustling of clothing, and all the while I could smell the faint scent of sweat and blood. I decided not to sleep that night. Then the sounds began to subside and the smell disappeared. I calmed down, my eyelids became heavy and my eyes closed. Shortly after this, I heard a very loud crash on the other side of the house. I jumped up in an instant. "Someone is in the house." I barked, and anxiety ran through my whole body. "Wake up!" I began to pull Emily off the bed. When she got up, I rushed to run to my parents' room. Dad was dead. His neck was cut open and blood poured from the gaping wound, forming a puddle on the floor. I saw that the door to the bathroom was closed, and a strange man was standing in front of it. He was very big. He turned around and looked at me, and then I saw his face for the first time. I will never forget him. His eyes were small, like beads, cold and sinister. He had a dirty beard and unkempt clothes, and there was blood all over his face. And then I felt this familiar smell, sweat and blood, but this time it was absolutely overwhelming. He saw me and smiled, showing a row of crooked yellow teeth. That smile gave me a shiver. It seemed to me that I was going to die, but he turned back to the bathroom door, completely oblivious to my presence. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I just howled and cried. I saw how he used his shoulder to knock down the door, which was my mother's only protection. I saw how he picked up the large razor that he had in his hand, and how he began to strike with it, chopping my mother into pieces. Then I heard the last thing I wanted to hear. It was Emily screaming from behind me. The big man looked at my little sister, then stood up and quickly walked towards us. My sister turned and ran. He rushed past me and chased after her. Why was she still in the house? Why didn't she run away? Now she was on the verge of death, and I was the only one who could save her. I ran after them. I expected the man to start killing her, just like the rest of the family, but I was sorely mistaken. He grabbed her hand and pulled her through the house. I tried to make as much noise as possible, hoping and praying that someone would come to our aid. He caught Emily and covered her mouth, muffling her screams. When he passed me, I pressed myself against the wall and whined in horror. "What?" He smiled crookedly again and said in a very cold, unnatural voice, "Be quiet. You're a good boy." He dragged my little sister to the front door and I ran after him. He opened the door, pulled Emily outside, and then slammed the door. Now I sit in the house with the corpses of my adoptive parents, shaking and whining with anxiety. He's out there with Emily. God knows what he's doing to her now, and I can't help her. I would help if I could, but I can't. I would catch up with him, but I can't. I'm sitting here looking at the front door. I look at my paws. If only I could open the doors,